Lauren, thank you so much for joining me today. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
And we're going to get this in just in the nick of time for Breast Cancer Awareness Month.
Yes.
So that obviously has a very personal impact on you.
Yeah.
So for our listeners, tell us a little bit about your journey.
Towards the end of November 2023, I was just at my office at home. I work from home. And I just thought, you know what, do a breast self-exam. So I was wearing this low-cut tank top, and instantly right away on my right breast at the 12 o'clock mark, if you think of it as a clock, I felt something that it felt like a walnut in its shell right underneath my skin. And I thought to myself, what is that? So I figured I'd wait 30 minutes to see if it went away. And then I
What
would
is that something that happens?
no,
Okay.
it was just what I thought. I thought maybe I was just imagining something that wasn't quite there, maybe
Right.
a little bit of denial.
Sure.
And 30 minutes later, it was still there. So I wasn't worried, but I said, you know, let me just get this checked. And I WhatsApped my GP, ended up going into her office a few days later, and she actually couldn't really feel it. And then she said, but we'll get you an ultrasound anyways. And because it's Dubai, I walked right from her office right to the ultrasound. And that ultrasound turned into a biopsy, which turned into a second biopsy and a diagnosis of breast cancer on December 15th, 2023, 10 days before Christmas.
Walk me through your emotions at that point.
Well, I was on a press trip at the time, and I had said yes to this press trip. It was to go for the inauguration of the winter season of Azerbaijan. And I'm a beauty editor. I have nothing to do with travel or winter seasons, but I said yes. It was a last minute request, and I always love to travel and to see other places, and I have never been to Azerbaijan. I didn't realize at the time how intense the biopsy would be and the healing process. I was quite sore, but I still went anyways because I had committed myself to it. And I got to Azerbaijan. I knew that the results would be coming back soon, but I didn't know how soon it would be. I was told about a week. And this was about 3 days after the biopsy. So got to this hotel, and then they told us we were actually taking a 5-hour bus ride to the second hotel where we would be staying at and doing all these winter activities. Which, to be honest, I just felt like, oh, I really don't want to be here. I would just want to be at home in bed. But I, found myself on that bus. And while I was on the bus, about 3 hours into the ride, I got a text message from my doctor, and she started it with "my love, ... And I knew right away that I had breast cancer. And I had told her to text me if she got the results back because I knew I wouldn't be able to get a call. Some people do message me and they say, I can't believe you found out on a text, but that was my doing. And I found out I had breast cancer. I was in this very busy bus with all these influencers and other journalists, and it was like I was just suddenly in this black hole and time just stopped. So by the time we got to the destination, I let the organizers know. And the next morning I flew right back to Dubai and then began just a long, long, long process of many different exams and tests and scans and blood work and all that stuff. And I felt really, I think I went through all the different stages of grief. I was angry. I was in denial. I was bargaining. I was trying to bargain with my oncologist. And, it was such an unknown. It was such a wrench put into my plans. I was planning on launching my beauty brand. I'd been working for 2 years on it. And now I was having this crisis. I'm also a mom of 2 teenagers. So I thought to myself, I can't leave them behind. And I started coming to terms with my own mortality, which is something I just wouldn't have thought of at the age of 41.
I'm married, been married a long time, and I know when my wife goes in for exams, it's something that's in her mind uppermost for days until she gets results.
Mm-hmm.
But the first question usually that comes up is there a history in your family?
In my immediate family, no. My dad's sister had breast cancer when she was in her 30s. And after I was diagnosed, my dad said to me, "Do you mind if I tell your cousins?" I have two female cousins on his side. And I said, "Yeah, tell the family." I didn't want to announce it on my social media or anything like that, but I said, absolutely tell all the family members so that they themselves can go get mammograms if they haven't in a while, and, just put it in their minds. I do not have the BRCA gene, but I don't know if my aunt did either, but there is some sort of history. After my dad had told my cousins and his sister, one of my cousins emailed me and she told me she had gone through breast cancer the year before, and that she didn't need chemo, but she had done radiation and all this stuff. And I said to her, "Why didn't you tell me? Like, family members should tell each other." And I was actually pretty angry about that. And she said to me, "Oh, I'd love to support you and all this stuff." And then in another email, she said something to the effect of she had let everyone know when she was diagnosed. And I was like, "Well, I'm your only female cousin. You didn't tell me." So I'm no longer speaking to her, and not in an angry way, but I just feel like after going through this journey, you just realize who matters in your
Mm.
life and who doesn't. And it's just my choice. I'm no longer speaking. Had I would have gotten a mammogram earlier or anything like that, I don't know. But I just feel like in families, you should always share this type of information.
So you said you have two teenagers. One is a girl.
Yes.
So what will be the process? Because I assume you want her to be aware, but you don't want her freaking out every time she
Yeah.
has to go to the doctor.
Hmm.
So have you had those conversations with her yet, or at least in your mind? And maybe this isn't the venue where you want to share what it
No,
is
it's
that you
fine.
want to do with her, but how will you sort of prep her? Because we're in Breast Cancer Awareness Month, and I think
Hmm.
it's a good time for women to be talking about at what age do you start sort of, doing the self exams as well as maybe, having mammograms.
Well, I think it's never too early for a self exam. It's a great habit to get into, and it's something that's so easy to do. It doesn't take a lot of time. That's how I found mine. So for her, she could start now. And I actually have gone through what that entails with her. As far as mammograms go, they say the age of 40, but I will tell you that I have met so many women in their 30s and 20s who've been diagnosed. So I feel for her, I know she'll be getting her first mammogram sometime in her 20s because of everything I went through, and I'll be on her case about that. I think the age should be completely lowered, and it needs to be because there's 1 in 8 women now that are diagnosed with breast cancer. And I've heard, it's not confirmed, but I've heard from a couple different places that in Dubai it's actually 1 in 3.
I think it's interesting when we talk about, at what age you should get it and whatnot, because for men, it's usually getting a prostate exam.
Hmm.
And that's consistently been lowered.
Yeah.
I'm soon to be 59. And as I've aged, it seems to keep getting lower.
You look great, by the way.
Thank you. I appreciate that. But I also think that for women, it makes perfect sense that,
Hmm.
if a doctor says, oh, I think for men, when I was growing up, I think it would have been like mid 50s or maybe 50. Now I think it's down to 40, but it's almost
Mm.
like actually maybe it should start even, at 30 or
Yeah.
35. So are there doctors with whom you would have spoken who said, yeah, anecdotally, I sort of recommend to women that they get an exam at a younger age?
I haven't had any doctors say that to me, but I have had doctors tell me that they are getting younger and younger patients. So I'm assuming that they would then make that correlation. I think what happens is that insurance gets involved with that sort of thing. And the whole breast cancer awareness is, there's a lot of depth to breast cancer that's not addressed with the breast cancer awareness, pink balloons, and cupcakes. So I think that those conversations aren't being had on public stages, and they certainly need to be.
Okay, so give me an example. Give me a couple
Mhm.
of topics that need to be addressed that aren't being addressed.
Well, first of all, there's many different types of breast cancer. It's not just one type of cancer. And there's also where the cancer falls in your breast and if the cancer has spread to your lymph nodes. I never knew any of this. When I was diagnosed, I had no idea that breast cancer could be hormone positive or hormone negative. Hormone positive, which is what I had, is when the cancer feeds on estrogen. And estrogen is just this wonderful hormone that keeps our skin nice and supple and our joints lubed, and it's a youthful hormone. So that hormone is actually the cancer's food, and it's how it grows. So to starve the cancer, you can't have any more estrogen in your body. So right now I have the hormones essentially of an 80-year-old woman, and I'm only 42. And I never knew any of this stuff before I was diagnosed. So I think breast cancer awareness to me just feels quite performative, and there's no actual education in the awareness.
It feels like many things in life where something is introduced
Mhm.
and then slowly we get used to it and it almost becomes part of the furniture.
Yeah.
And breast cancer awareness, and next month it'll be Movember, and
Yeah.
men will grow facial hair, but will they do anything about it? And will the awkward conversations happen? And I think, as you know, you're American, I'm Canadian, we both know what's going on back home in many different areas. But when it comes to the education process, I really do think we talk about diet, we talk about
Mhm.
self-care and self-love and mental awareness. I really think that the schools around the world need to sort of take on more ownership so
Mm.
that they're teaching children about how to have real conversations instead of just, the pink cupcakes.
Yeah. There's so many things that could happen in so many different facets to just bring more knowledge there. There's also so many other diseases out there. And when I hear about, so and so disease, someone mentions something to me, I think to myself, "Oh, that's too bad." But I don't really understand what's going through. I don't take the time to, Google and see, what is this disease? What would it be like? And then of course to acknowledge that one person can have the disease, someone else can have the disease, and it'll be two totally different experiences. So there's also an information overload. And I think if we were to do that about everything, it would just be way too much. But for me, in my experience with breast cancer, I'm just really shocked about this whole pink month versus what it really is. And I love the fact that people, care enough to wear the pink ribbon or to do some sort of little event in their office. But at the same time, I don't think the right information is getting across. And that's that's on everybody.
When you were going through it, did you find that there was any shame attached to having real conversations? Or I've seen your photographs because you've written about it.
Yeah.
You had lost all your hair,
Yeah.
and you had put on weight, and
Hmm.
you looked very different than you look now.
Yeah.
Was there shame, or you could tell that people were maybe feeling a little bit awkward about having that conversation with you?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And I think a lot of it too is cultural. In some cultures, someone told me the other day that if she had breast cancer, she wouldn't have even told her children that were living in the house with her. And I thought, well, how is that even possible? Like, how do you hide something like that? And I think a lot of people do feel shame about it. I was shocked when I was diagnosed because number one, I am a very healthy person. I don't really drink much alcohol, although occasionally I will, but not consistently. I exercise, I do all the right things on paper, and I'm also a really positive person. And being in the industry I am in, I see lots of, I would say, lower vibrational people everywhere, just like a lot of materialism and all this stuff. And I thought, how did I get breast cancer? Not that I would wish it on anyone else, but I thought, I feel like I'm a force of good. Like, how did this happen to me? And I was shocked by that. I was quiet about my diagnosis until I finished chemo, just because I didn't want a lot of people on social media messaging me about it and projecting their own fears and their own shame and their own ideologies onto me. And after I finished chemo, I came out with my story. In retrospect, I guess if I didn't have a public profile, I could have just kept it quiet a while longer because I was still processing it myself. And I didn't realize that at the time. So I did open up my energy fields into letting other people share their thoughts on it with me.
So you talk about trying to process it. So tell me, I guess it's been almost 2 years since you were diagnosed. I don't know
Yeah.
if enough time has past for you to look back
Mm,
and I know you've talked about it as a spiritual journey and also a bit of an adventure, which
yeah.
I think listening to your story, I think to me that sounds like the best positive outlook that you could take on it.
Yeah.
But when you do look back, um, why would you have, were you surprised, for instance, that you saw it as a spiritual journey and as an adventure?
So I tend to look at everything in life as an adventure. Moving to Dubai has been an adventure. Having two kids has been an adventure. Uh, and so breast cancer was another adventure. And I know it's a positive spin on it, but that's just my baseline thinking process. That's how I see life, this journey of life. And so for me, it was another adventure. It was one that I felt like I didn't sign up for in the 3D and like what we're doing right now, just, living our day to day lives. I think it was definitely a fated event. I chose to go through this experience before I incarnated into this life experience. And took me by surprise. But then when I was diagnosed, there was a slight remembering. And so I remember that I had actually chosen this and that there was something big that I would end up doing with it later on in my life.
So, do you know what that big is that you want to do?
Not yet. I mean, I'm definitely doing some advocacy now, and I share a lot on my own social media channels. One of my girlfriends left me a voice note last night. I was on Emirates News last night, and she said, you need to start a podcast on this. And I thought, oh my gosh, I don't have the time. But one thing I really want to do that made quite an impression on me while I was going through chemo is just or through all of my treatments, I should say, because I also went through 25 rounds of radiation, is the expense of these treatments. And initially, I had joined some Facebook groups when I was first diagnosed just I guess I was looking for support for, other people going through this. I left the groups early on because I just found them to be incredibly negative and everyone on there is just traumatized and it wasn't making me feel better, it was making me feel worse, so I chose to leave them. But I did see a lot of women saying this is going to bankrupt me, I can't afford this, I'm going to have to work throughout all of my treatments, and the treatments are hardcore. And so with my beauty brand, when I become profitable, I do really want to, it's incredibly important to me that I pay it forward because my husband's insurance was able to pay for everything. And I want to pay for other women's treatments.
So, you talked a little bit about money.
Hmm.
Again, coming from the States where healthcare is incredibly expensive,
Right.
and not just from a monetary point of view or a financial point of view, but and I know you were here, but do you think there would have been a lot of differences if you were going through this, say, back in the States compared to here
Yes. Here, I felt like it was the creme de la creme. I felt like I had the
from the
white,
treatment point of view?
yeah, I had the white glove service. I mean, I was catered to. Everything was instant. There was no waiting. Amazing doctors, amazing healthcare facilities. And I just felt like I had the peak of what is available to women going through breast cancer. If I was back in the US, it would probably have depended on where I was located and what type of hospitals and treatment facilities were available. And I think there would have been a much more waiting. And I based that on what I saw in these Facebook groups, people having to wait 2 months for their next appointment or to find something out. Whereas in Dubai, I waited 2 days.
And then, and this might be really difficult to answer, but I'm going to ask anyhow. And
Mhm.
from a cultural point of view, from a day to day sort of process, not necessarily looking at the medical realities,
Mhm.
do you think it was more, people were more understanding here compared to back home? Or is it back home, it's just a certain number of people get cancer and everybody around you sort of just accepts it?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know. I'm not sure. Here, I only told my close friends, and I don't have any family here. So it was just a handful of friends that knew. And overall, they were incredibly amazing. Back home, I don't know. I would have had my family right next to me, which would have been great. I don't know how I would have. I would be such a different person if I was living back home right now and never came over here and had this experience. So I don't know what type of job situation I would be in. I don't know. There's so many variables. There definitely is the inclination to put things into statistics, but I think it's also when it's your lived experience, you just see it completely differently. So maybe to like someone, across the country, they would say, "Oh yeah, it's just another lady that's got breast cancer," or another. I always see news anchors coming down with breast cancer, so it's just like another person. But maybe, to my own circle, it would be much different.
I'm going to assume it was very traumatic to go through
Yeah.
this. Is the mental health repercussions something that you're having to work through as well?
So while I was going through chemo, I started therapy, and it had been recommended to me by a few people to just help me grieve the whole process, to grieve the old me I was kind of leaving behind, and to just adjust to this whole new life I was stepping into. And so I started therapy, and it was great. And then I said to
And
myself,
had you been in therapy before?
no.
Okay.
I said to myself, why didn't I start this 10 years earlier? I would have had so much more clarity on my life and my decisions I've made and so much more. So I'm still in it. I'll probably be in therapy for the rest of my life in one way or another. I just think it's an amazing tool for self-discovery. And the therapy absolutely helped me with the mental component, the processing of my diagnosis. And I get lots of women every day reaching out to me on social media. And I always tell everyone, get yourself in therapy. And a lot of people are resistant to it because I think they find it shameful or there's stigmas attached or all this stuff. And I say, just put that aside. It's not real. And just this is your time for you. One of the things about breast cancer is prior to being diagnosed, I was like a hamster on a wheel. I was working like crazy. I was going to tons of beauty events all over Dubai, the mom thing, got my husband, my dog, and my friends, and I was just nonstop. And breast cancer actually wiped out my entire schedule. And I was only home now. And I had the immunity of a newborn baby. I couldn't go out and do things. If I got sick, it would delay treatment. I wanted to get chemo over as quick as I could. And so while I was home, I realized that chemo had actually given me a lot of blank space, a lot of wide open space. And there was such a gift in that. And it was something I would never have had in my normal day to day life. So it was time for me. It was a time for me to do deep introspection, to really think about who I have in my life. What am I doing in my life? What's no longer serving me? Who needs to go? Who should I invest more of my energy into? And it was a great time, honestly, for a lot of self discovery.
So women who've gone through what you've gone through talk an awful lot about how chemo is just the worst.
Yeah.
Explain for somebody who's never gone through it and for listeners and viewers, what happens?
So I actually had a little bit of experience with chemo before because my youngest brother had cancer and he went through chemo. So I'm about 9 years older than him, and I remember him as a baby just being bald, running around and so sickly looking. So when I was first diagnosed, they told me I probably would not need chemo. And that was because when they did the biopsies in my underarm, the sentinel lymph node, it's the first lymph node that the the breast cancer would hit. Both biopsies came back negative. But when I had my PET scan, it was lighting up as cancer was there. So I had my first surgery. I had a lumpectomy. And when I had that lumpectomy, I woke up in the recovery room and the doctor said to me, "Lauren, there's been a complication." And I said, "Oh, what is that?" And she said, "It turned out there was cancer in your sentinel lymph node and we took out 4 lymph nodes." And I was laying there, and I have a master's of science in nursing, and I'm also an engineer. And I said to myself, "Oh no, that means I'm going to need chemo." So the doctors then told me in follow-up appointments that yes, I would need chemo, and it turned out that I needed the toughest type of chemo for breast cancer. There's many different chemos, and it's known as the red devil. And that's because it's red in color and the side effects are devilish. So I had a port placed under my skin, which was another surgery. And it was the morning, February 22nd. 22 is one of my lucky numbers. It's always followed me. So it was not ironic at all. A little spirit wink from the universe that my first chemo was on the 22nd. And I was laying there in the bed at the chemo ward, and I just saw the red medication flowing down as it was starting. And I watched it go into my port, and I thought, all right, it's happening. And initially I was okay. I was able to work out for a few days after the first chemo. I was cold capping, which is when you put negative 50 degrees Celsius, which is also negative 50 degrees Fahrenheit, dry ice all over your head, tightly put into a cap and fastened. And it's to keep your head essentially frozen to reduce the blood flow so the chemo won't hit your follicles. The chemo is designed to target fast replicating cells, which is what cancer cells are. And also our hair is that, our nails. So it was an attempt to keep my hair. 3 weeks after my first session, I lost 80% of my hair in about 72 hours. So unfortunately, the cold capping didn't work for me, and we ended up shaving my head. But by that point, I was feeling the worst I've ever felt in my entire life. I was completely lethargic. I was sick to my stomach all the time. I was taking so many pills. I would have to inject myself every night with this really thick needle. It was almost like a nail. And it was to help my white blood cell count stay up. And I just felt like I was being killed from the inside out. I said to my doctor after my fourth infusion, I said to him, if you give me one more of these, I think I'm going to die. And he looked at me and he said, yes, you will. So you only get 4 of them. After those 4 were done, I had 12 more chemos, and that was with a medication called paclitaxel. It's known as Taxol for short. And that medication threw my body into menopause. So I was having hot flashes every couple minutes, all day and night. I had incredible joint pain. The medication is actually, I was told by my oncologist that Native Americans used to take this plant. It's from a plant, and they used to take this plant, put it on the edges of their bows, and it's a neurotoxin. So they would, shoot the animals, and the animals would fall, and then they couldn't move or whatever because of this toxin. And I had peripheral neuropathy. My fingers and my feet were completely numb. And my thumb stayed numb for about a good 7 months after the chemo ended. So there were just lots and lots and lots of side effects. It was much more manageable than the first 4, but overall, it was the most intense thing I've ever gone through in my life. And with me saying that, I know a woman who's had over 70 chemos. And she is in Dubai. And to me, I just think, wow, I had 16 and I just was blown away by it. And for her to have 70 and keep going is pretty amazing.
So you have, as you mentioned, 2 teenagers.
Mhm.
What do you? I assume you were incredibly open and honest with your kids about what you were
Yes.
going through. What is it that you think that, because you saw this as an adventure and as a
Mhm.
spiritual journey. So I assume, because of your positive outlook, that you think that what they saw was probably something that would help them later on in life.
Yeah.
And so what is it that they've taken away from watching you go through this?
Wow. Well, that's a great question. I think at the time I told them they were both terrified. And the idea of losing their mom, I never had a sick mom. I don't know what that was like, but I wanted to just be as open with them as possible. And I've been like that with all of my parenting style is that they can ask me any questions, which they do. And I wanted them to feel as much a part of this as possible, to also give them a little bit of a sense of control because it was such an out of control, chaotic situation. They shaved my head for me. And actually, they told me both that they loved how much I was home. which so there was so many silver linings in this journey. I think as they get older, they're going to continually process it and they'll see different aspects of the journey in different ways and look back on what they went through as a child and see what I went through when they're 40. They'll say, wow, this was the age mom was when she got sick. And there's always going to be revelations and new ways of thinking, perhaps new perspectives for them as they go through life. And I hope I did as good of a job as possible to keep them feeling as safe and as comforted in this journey. I did put both of them in therapy, and so they would have a third party to bounce anything off of. My daughter lasted 2 or 3 sessions, and then she said, Mom, I talked to you about everything. I don't need to do it. And my son, the therapy's during school, so he got to miss out on French class. So he said to me, I'm going to stay with it because it's helping me with my emotions. I said, okay. So he's still doing it. And I think that, he jokes about it, but I have to imagine there's benefit to it. I don't think that anyone cannot be benefited by going to therapy.
So what's the future from a health perspective like for you?
The future is just to enjoy my life, to live my life, to do all the things I want to do. And I'm still pretty healthy. I've gained a ton of weight. So I'm working on slowly losing that with grace. I was always quite thin and I was, very much into that Dubai lifestyle beforehand. So that's been interesting and seeing life as from a different, I guess, way and perspective. But I'm doing everything the doctor has prescribed to me. I'm on hormone therapy, so I still am in this postmenopausal state, and I will be for another 4 years until my body would probably naturally go into menopause anyways. And I'm just going to I'm not worried about it coming back. If it does, then I know I can handle it. And I'm just committed to really enjoying my health and celebrating my health and just living my life.
Great attitude.
Thank you.
Lauren, thanks so much for joining me today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.